What's up, Switches?
I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Cicero.
And this is the Switching Lanes podcast.
Today's topic, should we flip the switch on the death penalty?
So, in current news, I'm sure many of you have been reading up on Rodney Reed and his case where he's on death row for the rape and murder of a woman by the name of Stacey Stites. And if you've read that, you also know he has an execution date of November 20th and that they have overwhelming evidence against her fiance or then fiance, Jimmy Fennell, as well. Now, Rodney Reed has been in prison for the past 21 years attempting to appeal this decision. His case has really brought us to an important question. Is it time for us to do away with the death penalty? And we're really torn. This is something I used to be very torn on because, and it's a heavy decision. It really is. So you should be torn on it. You should really have to think about it, right. Really weigh it out. You know what I mean? To before you just come straight to a decision, because you really need to understand all the aspects of it. You know what I mean?
Right. I was gonna say it definitely comes down to more than just, oh, he did this to a person, so he should die.
Right.
I mean, you have these situations, and there have been several cases where people have been executed and they were found to be innocent after the fact.
Absolutely.
So you're looking at this man's case where all this evidence stacks up and it goes to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And, given the circumstances of the situation, it's definitely racial.
Right.
She's a white lady. He's a young black man in Texas back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like, the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
20-something
in the 90s,
ago.
Right.
And so, I mean...
And it was even mentioned that it was a very racial town at that time.
Right. And a lot of towns in Texas are still very racial towns. And so you have to really be careful in these situations. And then, with the fiance being someone in a place of power, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
can really manipulate the situation, which sounds like he has.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm not judge and jury, but just reading some of the facts from the case and some of the things that are coming out now, it's definitely a situation that has possibly been manipulated to his benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And now an innocent person could die in less than 30 days now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
less than 30 days. And like you said, there have been in the past innocent people who were exonerated as far as
after their death.
Right, right. And according to CNN, I went to CNN.com for a lot of these facts. And since 1973, there have been 165 death row exonerations as of May 2019. 165 people who have been sitting on death row who were later determined to be innocent.
Right.
And that's crazy. 29 of those, for some odd reason, 29 were from the state of Florida. That's a large amount from one state. A large amount.
It is. It really is. But I guess you just have to think about the fact that there are only 29 states where it's legal. So
right.
It's not, honestly, until we started really talking about this, I didn't even think about the fact that it's not legal all over the United
mm-hmm.
States. I kind of had that idea, but I just never sat and thought about it.
Right.
It's only legal in 29 states.
29
so
states.
There are a lot of places that it's not.
Mm-hmm. And the thing a lot of people tend to believe is that, they lean more toward the death penalty because, it's such a financial burden on the state to keep these guilty people alive for so very long. The truth of the matter is, and I've researched this multiple times, and I have not found a conclusion as to why it is this way. The death penalty is more expensive than a life sentence. I don't get that. I don't.
I don't either. I mean, that's bananas.
Right. So a study was done before the state of Maryland abolished the death penalty there. Uh-huh. It was a study was done, and it was found that keeping an inmate on death row cost them $2 million more than having an inmate who was on just had a straight life sentence.
Like a breakdown of that?
It didn't. And I really need an explanation to that. So you can definitely believe that's something I'm going to look more into.
Yeah.
But this is not my first time coming across that piece of information. The death penalty is more expensive.
I would be interested in that breakdown.
Absolutely. I'm going to find it for you, and I'm going to post it when I do. Because I want to know, how is it so much more expensive? You would expect it to be less.
Right.
And then you have, of course, a lot of us, because I know at one point I felt the same way. A lot of us wonder, well, if this person is on death row, why do you keep them alive for so long before you finally execute them?
Right.
When I was on the fence about whether people should be executed or not, I definitely needed an answer to that question. But you have to keep in mind, these people are on death row, so they have to have time to complete that legal process. They have to have enough time to get in all of the appeals that they're allowed and so forth. So there's a legal process to follow through with. Right. And that's what that long draw is all about.
Which some of them follow their process all the way up to the moment of death.
The moment of, yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Well, let's just say just hours before.
Right.
I put it that way. But that seems like, I'm sure for them, the moment before death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we actually had another person. We had someone comment on our page, maybe yesterday. I can't remember if it was this morning or yesterday. Mm-hmm. And her comment was, that she thinks maybe if the crime is fitting and if that person confesses to the crime, then they should be given the death penalty. And my thing about that, and I think I responded on the post, but my thing about that is with confessions can be extremely tricky.
They can.
Absolutely. A confession can be extremely tricky because people confess for multiple reasons. You can have somebody confessing simply trying to protect someone else. Mm-hmm. So, and we definitely don't want to forget the people who confess under duress. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you have these people who, I think one of the people who described it said he had his confession beat out of him.
Right.
Think about that. Weigh on that. You can't always rely on a confession.
Well, I will say this. I mean, and I know people always say, I haven't made it a secret throughout our talks and conversations that I'm opposed to the death penalty.
Right.
Anybody that knows me know I'm opposed to that. And people, of course, I've had people say, well, until you have a loved one that's killed or hurt or this or that, you'll change the story. Well, the fact of the matter is I haven't changed my story. My mom was murdered.
Right.
My mom was murdered when I was 22. That's almost 20 years ago. And that guy confessed. He confessed in the interrogation room. He wrote out a confession. They wrote it out. He signed it. He confessed in the courtroom. I believe he did it. They have all the evidence in the world against him, as well as his confession. Mm-hmm. I still don't believe he should have been killed. I still don't believe there should have been a death penalty. Because for me, where does that leave us?
Right.
Had they given him the death penalty, and I know some of my family members wanted that, and I respect their choice, their opinions. Where would that have left me? Had they killed him, I still don't have my mom.
Right.
To me, that doesn't give me a sense of justice. I mean, I've even had somebody say, hey, do you think it's justice for him to be in jail for the rest of his life? In my opinion, yes.
Right.
And my forgiveness has been questioned because I feel that way. Yeah, I forgive him as a Christian. That's what I do. However, there are consequences for your actions.
Right.
That's his consequence.
And that's his consequence. Absolutely.
And, I mean, Godspeed to him. I don't have any negative words for him. However, death penalty, I don't think so. Because I think that will still give his family a life sentence. His family, he has a son. He had a son that was born, I think, shortly after he did that. Mm. And that child has not been able to grow up with his dad.
Right.
And this is as a result of his dad's choices. I get it.
Right.
But a kid is out there without his dad. Mm-hmm. That's an extension of him. So that child is suffering. So that, to say, at least that child can have conversations with his dad. I don't know how that family dynamic is. I don't know where they went after that.
But he has that option.
He has that option.
Yeah.
Because you have so many children in the world, and not to take it in another direction, but you have so many children who don't know dad.
Right.
Don't know who he is. And that's a missing piece to their puzzle. This kid don't have to have that missing piece. You may not have that active role, but you don't have a missing piece.
Right.
Because you can still have conversations with your dad. You can still get information regarding your dad.
Right.
You can still learn about where you came from. So, as far as the death penalty, I think that would have been a bit much. And again, that wouldn't have eased any of my hurts.
Right.
Because even almost 20 years later, I'm still hurting from that. That still is a pain that can't be described, and it's a pain that can't be healed. That's just something you learn to live with. You learn to self-soothe. You learn to pray and ask God to help comfort you through those difficult moments. Because, I mean, with the holidays coming up, those times are going to come.
Absolutely.
So, with milestones in my life, with milestones in my son's life, those times are going to come. But you learn. You learn to cope with it, but that's a pain that could never be eased. So death penalty couldn't have done that for me.
Right.
I don't really understand how. I would really like to know from someone who's for it, how would that ease your pain? Or someone who's been there.
Right.
Because it's easy to sit on this side and say, I'm for the death penalty. Mm-hmm. It's very easy. But let's just say you're for it, and then your son commits a murder.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, are you still for it?
Are you still for it?
How do you feel about it now?
How do you feel about that now?
Yeah. And like you said previously, and that could be another side to it as well, this child still has access, or I won't say access, I'll say the option for communication with his father. His father is in prison for murder.
But he's a phone call away.
Right. And I can communicate with him, and that could very well be what stops his son from going out into that street life. Let's say his father...
That's a different perspective.
You understand? Let's say that his father actually did have the opportunity to reflect on his actions because of all this time that he's been in prison.
Right.
And at some point he had a change of heart. You know what I'm saying? And so now he's regretful of the things that he's done, and he's able to teach these things to his son. He's able to tell him, choose a better path than I did. Mm-hmm. Don't do these things or these things or whatever. Absolutely. And he's able to relay this to his son and maybe, just maybe, keep him out of the streets like the father was. And maybe that'll be the turning point for the son. You never know. But he has that option.
That's a good way to look at it. I would love for that to be the case.
Right.
I mean, because do I believe that the guy has had time to reflect? Absolutely. He's definitely had time to reflect. And I actually hope that he has some regrets about what he did.
Right.
And with that being said, like you said, with talking to his son, communicate with his son, that can definitely be a tool to say, hey, don't go down the road I went down.
Right.
So I'm really, like I said, with the people who are for it, and I don't knock anybody's decisions or choices. I mean, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Right. If you're for it, then so be it. I'm just really curious as to how that would look for you. Mm-hmm. And I hope that they're not able to tell me based on experience, because I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
Right.
But I really wonder how that would look for someone who has a son who has committed murder, has a brother who has committed murder,
or a father,
who
someone
has
close.
committed murder,
right?
Or any crime that's befitting of the death penalty, not just murder. Mm-hmm. So,
and what crimes are befitting of the death penalty? I mean, we have people locked up in this country right now that have been locked up for the past 40, 50 years on minor drug charges. Yeah. That's you pretty much have been given a life sentence. You've been in prison for 40 years on a minor drug charge. I mean, and see, that's part of my issue with the death penalty right there. African Americans make up 13% of the population in the United States. 13, just 13. Okay? However, African Americans make up 42% of those persons on death row. Wow. And 35% of people who've been executed in this country. Wow. 35. That's overwhelming for us to only have a 13% presence. Right. Very much so. It feels very predatory. So for me, the death penalty is more geared toward African Americans. Now, of course, just like any other punishment, you're going to have people of other races